Greetings, we hope all is well. This is the Walking by Faith podcast hosted by Minister Larry Montgomery, Sr. and friends. Genesis 1:1, KJV, states, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." And 2 Corinthians 5:7, KJV, states, "For we walk by faith, not by sight." While Romans 10:17, KJV, says, "So then faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God." Which brings us to Hosea 4:6, KJV, that states, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge." Welcome to another episode of the Walking by Faith podcast. I am your host, Minister Larry Montgomery, Sr. The sole purpose of this podcast is to present candid discussions about various words that are found in the Bible with an eye towards defining in the context of these troubled times, along with clarity, insight, commentary, and hopefully some revelation to interested listeners. This podcast is a presentation of the Montgomery Media Group.tv and can be found on most podcast platforms. Video presentations are available on YouTube, the African American Shopping Network channel. This show is sponsored by www.theauthor'scorner.online. Please like us and follow us on Facebook.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Walking by Faith podcast. I'm your host, Elder Dr. Larry Montgomery Sr., and this week we're going to conclude our 9-part series on verses, 9 verses in the Bible that are deemed offensive and why. If you've been following me, you know that we've been talking about an article that showed up online a few weeks ago from a Jenny Dean of the Floppy Cats. And, we kind of start to show off with a recap of what was presented in the article, which reads as follows. The Bible is a complex book with a wide range of interpretations. While many people find comfort and inspiration in its pages, there are also a number of verses that are considered to be offensive and harmful. And it goes on to say that here is verse 9 of the 9 from Colossians 3:18. So let's unpack it along with an explanation of why they are considered to be so. At this particular point, I'm going to put a video in for our YouTube presentation that'll be available on Monday afternoon on the African American Shopping Network channel.
Got God? Get Night Church Television for 24-hour, 7 days a week Bible study for only $1.99 per week at www.nightchurchtelevision.com. Got God? Get Night Church Television for 24-hour, 7 days a week Bible study for only $1.99 per week at www.nightchurchtelevision.com.
A challenging word, Colossians 3:18 in context. Colossians 3:18 is a short verse in the New Testament. It says, "Wives, submit yourselves to your husbands, as is fitting in the Lord." Many people find this verse difficult today. It makes us ask questions about marriage and roles. This verse is part of a letter written by Paul. Paul was an apostle, a key leader in the early Christian church. He wrote to a young church in a town called Colossae. This town was in what we now call Turkey. Understanding this verse means looking at the whole letter. It also means understanding the world of Paul's time. Paul talks to wives, husbands, children, parents, slaves, and masters. His instructions are for everyone in the Christian home. Paul is painting a vision for Christian family life. This life is meant to be different because of Jesus. The letter to the Colossians itself is full of big ideas. Paul is writing to encourage the believers. He also wants to correct some wrong ideas they were hearing. The main point Paul makes is about Jesus. Jesus is supreme. He is Lord over all creation. He is the head of the church. Everything holds together in him. This might seem like a grand theological point, but Paul connects it directly to how Christians should live. Their everyday lives should reflect this truth about Jesus. This includes how they behave in their homes. Homes in the ancient world, a different time. To understand Paul's words in Colossians 3:18, we must step back into his world. The first century Roman Empire had very different ideas about family. Society was strongly patriarchal. This means the father, held most of the authority. His power extended over his wife, his children, and any slaves in the household. He was legally responsible for them. He often made all the important decisions. However, Paul does something new with this old form. He doesn't just repeat the common cultural ideas, he infuses the household code with Christian meaning. He brings Jesus into the picture. For example, the instruction to wives is followed by, "as is fitting in the Lord." This is a crucial addition. It changes the basis for the behavior. It's not just about following cultural norms or a husband's wishes. It's about living in a way that pleases God and reflects one's faith in Jesus. This was a radical shift in perspective for many. Living it out, Colossians 3:18, then and now. So what did Paul mean when he told wives to submit? The Greek word used it was a word used in many contexts. In a military sense, it meant to arrange troops in an orderly way under a commander. It suggests a voluntary placing of oneself in a supportive role. It does not automatically mean inferiority or total obedience to any whim. Paul also uses this idea of submission in other ways. For instance, in Ephesians 5:21, he tells all believers to submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. This points towards mutual respect and cooperation. The phrase, "as is fitting in the Lord," is key to understanding Colossians 3:18. This phrase qualifies the instruction significantly. It means the submission is not absolute or unconditional. It is to be done in a way that aligns with Christian character. It must be appropriate for someone who follows Jesus. This means it should never lead to condoning sin or abuse. Rather, it points to a relationship ordered by love, respect, and the values of God's kingdom. It is about creating a harmonious household that honors Christ. It is also vital to read this verse alongside the instruction to husbands. In Colossians 3:19, Paul immediately says, "Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them." This was a strong command in that culture. While some Roman writers spoke of affection, Paul's call for love, selfless, sacrificial love, was distinctive. He sets a high standard for husbands. This creates a context of mutual responsibility. It's not a one-sided demand on wives, rather it's about both partners contributing to a loving, Christ-centered marriage. Applying this verse today needs wisdom and care. Our cultures are very different from the first century Roman world. We rightly value equality and partnership in marriage. A direct, unthinking application of Colossians 3:18 can be harmful. It can be misused. Instead, we should look for the underlying Christian principles. These include mutual love, respect, service, and a shared commitment to honoring Christ in the relationship. In any healthy partnership, there will be times of yielding to one another for the common good. The goal is a marriage that reflects God's love and grace to the world.
Got God? Get Night Church Television for 24-hour 7 days a week Bible study for only $1.99 per week at www.nightchurchtelevision.com. Got God? Get Night Church Television for 24-hour 7 days a week Bible study for only $1.99 per week at www.nightchurchtelevision.com.
On YouTube at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, the verse which is referred to, Colossians 3:18, reads, "Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands, as it is fit in the Lord." This verse is another example. This is what the author Jenny Dean wrote. This verse is another example of bigotry and misogyny in the Bible. It teaches that wives should submit to their husbands in everything, even if it means doing things that are against their will or that they believe to be wrong. that Jenny Dean goes on and concludes. The Bible is a multifaceted book, but it is important to be aware of the offensive and harmful verses that it contains. These verses can be used to justify violence, oppression, and discrimination. It is important to read the Bible critically and to be aware of the historical and cultural context in which it was written. We should also be mindful of the ways in which the Bible can be misinterpreted and used to justify harmful beliefs and behaviors. It is important to remember that the Bible is not a monolithic text, and there is a wide range of interpretations of its teachings. We should strive to read the Bible in a way that is inclusive and respectful to all people. We can also use the Bible to promote positive change. The Bible contains many messages of love, compassion, and justice. We can use these messages to challenge oppression and discrimination and to create a more just and equitable world. Now that concludes the excerpts I'm going to provide you from the article entitled 9 Bible Verses That Are Offensive and Why by Jenny Dean. Now, I can go over basically those 2-3 paragraphs that were written, but I'm going to save that for later because I've kind of said it a number of times. Matter of fact, 8 times since I started this, my thoughts on that writing. The reason for this series is because the internet is something that has become a household object, a center in the household, and that people read things on it that are not necessarily true. Some of them are false. Some of them haven't even been researched or vetted. And so when it comes to the things of the Bible, it would be easy for someone to sway a Christian or upcoming Christian or young Christian to believe that there are some problems in the Bible that God was not aware of. Anything in the Bible is what God would have in there. Yes, man may have written the labor in writing it, but it was approved by God, and that God used people. And when you say, well, so what's the big deal about using people? How else was he going to do it? Was he just going to print it in heaven and send it down here? No, he used people, and he used different kinds of people from different backgrounds for different reasons to make his point, to help us get a better understanding of him and his ways, because he is the creator. He didn't invent this, he created it. And so when it comes down to reverencing him, you need to get a full understanding of what the word reverence means, because you don't have to be here another minute, another moment, unless God has allowed you to be here. Nothing happens. Nothing happens. Nothing has ever happened. Nothing will ever happen unless God allows it to happen, because he created us. Okay, I want you to get that clear in your head. And don't be so willing and gullible to accept whatever you read or hear. Go to the Bible itself. Read for yourself. Then go to God and ask him to give you clarity and understanding of what you've read. Because he didn't put everything in the Bible. He put enough in the Bible to give you a reason to come to him and to pray and talk to him about what's in the Bible and what's actually happening in your life, so he can give you clarity. He wants to be a part of your life. I'm not going to start preaching to you, but God wants to be a part of your life personally. He's not just a God for the group. He's a God for you individually. So let me go on here. When we talk about Galatians 3:18, which reads as follows, and I'm going to read a couple more verses because this is the thing what people usually do, the enemy, how he uses people. He'll give them a verse, maybe two verses. Oh, read this because this is what it means. No, read the entire chapter. Once you've read the entire chapter, if you focus in on one or two verses, then pray on it and go to God and ask him to give you understanding. Okay, Colossians 3:18, verse 18. Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands, and it is as it is fit in the Lord. 19. Husbands, love your wives, and be not bitter against them. 20. Children, obey your parents in all things, for this is well-pleasing unto the Lord. 21. Fathers, provoke not your children to anger, lest they be discouraged. 22. Servants, obey in all things your masters, according to the flesh, not with eye service as men pleasers, but in singleness of heart, fearing God. The last verse, 23. And whatsoever ye do, do it heartily, as to the Lord, and not unto men. There's a lot more to what was said. So quickly, right off the bat, the agenda was to mislead you, to have you only look at one word, one verse. Oh, that's a problem. That's harmful to us. Us who? We don't rank. We're just dust. Are we going to stand up here and talk about what God said? Who are you? Let me go on. Because there's a couple of points in here today. We're going to take a few minutes to go over so we get a complete understanding of what God meant when he starts talking about submission. That's where we're going. The author points out that the passage teaches that wives should submit to their husbands in everything. That is exactly what God commands. Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands, as it is fit in the Lord. And it says in the same breath that in verse 19, husbands, love your wives and be not bitter against them. If you are a woman and disagree with what God has designed to be marriage, then don't get married. Just live together in sin or do a drive-by when it is convenient. But if you are a Christian and want to be married, then accept what counts as the rules of marriage. You can become a Christian at any point in life. If you've already married before you became a Christian, and I say became a Christian, that you got understanding of what Christ would have. If you got married before then, this is going to help you understand the situation that you're in, because you should have gotten this understanding as soon as you became a Christian. I don't see anything wrong with that, since it is fair and for the good of the marriage and both of those involved. So verse 18 and verse 19 captured the wife and the husband. Although we talked about the wife first, that might be confusing to someone because the husband is the head of the household. Now, I'm not going to, don't send me no emails about that, because this is how God laid it out. God may let something change for a reason, but he's still in control. And if he said this is the order, then this is the order. God, then the husband, then the wife. I'm going to explain that in a little bit. In the full context of the passage, I don't see where a problem could exist. Yet the author, Jenny Dean, goes on to assume that even if it means doing things that are against their will or that they believe to be wrong. We're going to talk about that.
If your bookshelf needs a new thrill, look no further. The Contestant is here. Dive into the electrifying world of The Contestant by Larry Montgomery Sr. This heart-pounding narrative unfolds in 3 gripping parts: Escape from the Island, the Genesis Challenge, and the Ultimate Game Show. Greg Stone's journey promises sky-high stakes and edge-of-your-seat suspense. Packed with twists, turns, and the ultimate reveal of Greg's unique abilities, The Contestant will keep you guessing until the very last page. Critics are raving, calling it a masterful tale of suspense and intrigue. Don't miss out on this thrilling sci-fi adventure. Grab your copy of The Contestant today on Amazon or visit authorlarrymontgomery.com. Happy reading.
Whose will are we talking about? Is the question. In the marriage, the two, a man and a woman, come together as one. Let me repeat that. In the marriage, the two, a man and a woman, come together as one. There is no individual will. If there ever becomes individual wills and they collide, then dissolve the marriage. However, if you do not want to dissolve the marriage, seek counseling, or better yet, seek God to work it out, because the marriage is his design. So now, I picked up an article on this very topic. I Googled it, okay, to see if there were any support for this author, Jenny Dean's point of view. The title of the article is "Wives Must Submit to Their Husbands as It Is Fitting in the Lord." Interesting title, right? If there are no questions, then we can all go home now. But the obvious simplicity becomes incredibly complex as you begin to sort it out. For one thing, there are probably thousands of subjective opinions about what a submissive wife is like. Many think of the Archie and Edith Bunker model, where the husband rules the roost by barking orders at his half-witted slave of a wife. A husband once complained to me that his wife wasn't submissive. I asked him what he thought that meant. He snapped. When I say paint the house black, she picks up a brush and starts painting. In a similar vein, some think that submission means the total passivity of the wife. The husband makes all the decisions without consulting her or taking her needs and desires into account. He controls the money, determines where the family will live, whether he will take a new job, whether they buy a new car, etc. She passively goes along. I heard of a seminary graduate who came home and, without discussing it, announced to his wife that they would be moving across the country where she had no family or friends. He couldn't understand why she wasn't excited about this great ministry opportunity for him. Others think that submission means that the wife should take care of all the household chores, cooking, cleaning, shopping, and dealing with the kids, while the husband works, brings home the paycheck, and watches sports on TV. On the opposite side, many Christians now embrace egalitarianism. They claim that there are no distinctive roles for men and women in marriage or in the church. There should be mutual submission with no one exercising final authority. They argue that the biblical commands for wives to be subject to their husbands were culturally determined. Now, Paul told wives to be subject to their husbands in that male-dominated culture so that the truth of the equality of the sexes would not interfere with the gospel. But now that we live in a more egalitarian age, we should cast off all gender-based role distinctions, as if the subject were not difficult enough to sort out. We also have widespread wife abuse, which is often blamed on teaching wives to be submissive. 1 in 3 women have been the subject of some form of physical violence from an intimate partner. 1 in 5 women have been victims of severe physical violence by an intimate partner. About 1 in 5 instances of domestic violence involves a weapon. These statistics come from the ncadv.org. If you think that such abuse is rare in the church, you're not in touch with reality. The late Chuck Colson told this story on his Breakpoint radio program 10/20/09. A woman I'll call Marlene went to her pastor for help. She said, "My husband is abusing me. She told him last week he knocked me down and kicked me. He broke one of my ribs." Marlene's pastor was sympathetic. He prayed with her, and then he sent her home. Try to be more submissive, he advised. After all, your husband is your spiritual head. 2 weeks later, Marlene was dead, killed by her abusive husband. Her church could not believe it. Marlene's husband was a Sunday school teacher and a deacon. How could he have done such a thing? Tragically, studies reveal that spousal abuse is just as common within the evangelical churches as anywhere else. This means that about 25% of Christian homes witness abuse of some kind. And the statistics on physical abuse don't include verbal or emotional abuse. So in light of all these confusing factors, how should we deal with Paul's admonition to wives to submit to their husbands? First, we need to answer the question, what is submission? Submission is to put oneself under another's authority. The Greek word Paul uses here is a military term meaning to put oneself in rank under another. God has ordained the principle of authority and submission in a number of different spheres. Citizens are to be subject to civil authorities. We find that in Romans 13:1. Slaves to their masters, that's in Colossians 3:22. Church members to their leaders, that's found in 1 Corinthians 16:16. Children to their parents, Colossians 3:20. And wives to their husbands, Ephesians 5:22, Colossians 3:18, Titus 2:5, and 1 Peter 3:1. Every time the New Testament speaks to the role of wives, the command is the same. Be subject to your husband. The Bible contains several passages where God, the Father of Jesus, calls on Christians to follow or obey their commands. These passages emphasize obedience as an act of love, devotion, and recognition of God's authority. Here are a couple of examples. God the Father in Deuteronomy 10:12-13. And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God ask of you, but to fear the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to him, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and to observe the Lord's commands, and decrees that I am giving you today for your own good. This passage demonstrates God's call to obedience as an expression of love and reverence. If we turn to Exodus 20:1-17, the Ten Commandments are a direct set of instructions given by God to guide moral and spiritual behavior. Jesus, in John 14:15, Jesus said, "If you love me, keep my commands." Here, Jesus connects obedience to his commands with love for him. Matthew 22:37-40, in response to a question about the greatest commandment, Jesus states, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself." All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. Jesus summarizes God's commandments into principles of love for God and for others. An example of general obedience is found in Romans 6:16. Don't you know that when you offer yourselves to someone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one you obey, whether you are slaves to sin, which leads to death, or to obedience, which leads to righteousness. This verse uses the metaphor of slavery to illustrate the importance of choosing obedience to God over sin. Now in James 1:22, do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. This reinforces the notion that Christians are to act on God's commands, not just hear them. These and other passages highlight a recurring biblical theme. Obedience is not merely about subjugation, but about aligning one's life with God's purpose, demonstrating love and trust in his wisdom. If you need a definition for subjugation, subjugation refers to the act of bringing someone or something under control, often by force, and making them subordinate or subject to authority. It can involve the oppression or domination of a group, nation, or individual, stripping them of autonomy or freedom and imposing the will of another over them. We don't like the idea of submission to authority, but before you react against this command, consider some mitigating factors. First, whenever God grants authority, it is always for the blessing and protection of those under authority and never for the advantage of one in authority. God loves people, and in his wisdom, he has ordained proper authority for the benefit of the human race. If those in government authority use their position to further their own interests at the expense of those under them, they are corrupt and will answer to God, who delegated authority to them. You don't just become a leader because you're smart or because you're rich or because you think you know more than everybody else. You became a leader because God allowed it to happen. And that's something that we need to focus on in these troubled times. The leadership that we have now here, God has ordained it for whatever reason. And us Christians, as long as we trust in God, it will be well. Yeah, in a battle, in a war, some will die. This is true. But what happens after death is more important than the fact that you died. Because as the God said, if you believe in me, you'll be with me in eternity. If you don't believe in me, where are you going to be? We'll talk about that another time. Likewise, any husband who uses his authority in the home to lord it over his family for his own advantage is liable before God for abusing his authority. To be in authority does not mean greater perks, but rather greater responsibility and accountability before God. Second, it's important to recognize that husbands are never commanded to exercise authority over your wife. The headship of the husband is stated as a fact, but the commands to submit are always given to the wife. The husband is commanded to love his wife sacrificially. Almost always when couples come for marriage counseling, they are pointing the finger at each other. The wife complains that the husband is unloving and insensitive. He complains that she isn't submissive and doesn't meet his needs. But Paul tells husbands in Ephesians 5:25, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her. He tells wives in Ephesians 5:22, be subject to your own husbands as to the Lord. When husbands and wives each focus on their God-ordained responsibilities toward each other, there will be harmony, not abuse. Third, to be in authority does not in any way imply the superiority of the husband or the inferiority of the wife. A wife may, in fact, be superior in intellect and spiritual maturity to her husband. Paul affirms elsewhere in Galatians 3:28 that she is just as much a member of Christ as her husband is. Peter calls the wife a fellow heir of the grace of life. You find that in 1 Peter 3:7. She is in every way equal as a person to her husband. But God has ordained the principle of authority for the orderly functioning of government, the church, and the home. To resist it is to resist God who ordained it. We find that in Romans 13:1-2. To put oneself under the authority of another does not imply passivity. A submissive wife is not one who meekly goes along with her husband while keeping her thoughts and feelings to herself. Close relationships are built on truthfulness and openness in the context of love. If a wife withholds her viewpoint or feelings under the guise of submissiveness, she is creating distance in her relationship with her husband. Also, a submissive wife should properly confront her husband's sin. When 1 Peter 3:1 says that a wife should win her disobedient husband without a word by her godly behavior, it is not prohibiting her from speaking. Peter means that the main emphasis of the wife's way of changing her husband should be her behavior, not sermons. A disobedient husband will not be won over by a preaching, nagging wife. But that does not mean that in the context of living a godly life, a wife cannot lovingly speak to her husband about his disobedience and how it is damaging their relationship. If a wife does not speak the truth in love, she is not fulfilling her responsibility in the marriage. True submission is communicated both by attitudes and actions. A wife can be strong and even outspoken and yet be submissive in spirit if she respects her husband and backs his leadership even when she disagrees. Or she can be outwardly submissive but inwardly defiant, using deception and manipulation to get her own way. God doesn't want grudging compliance, where a wife says, I'll submit, but I know you're wrong and I'll never let you forget it when it doesn't work out. True submission means that after an open sharing of thinking and feelings with prayer. Let me read that again. True submission means that after an open sharing of thinking and feelings with prayer, if there is still a disagreement, a wife yields to her husband's authority and seeks to help him in his responsibility to lead under God. But perhaps you're wondering, couldn't the submission of wives just have been a cultural concession on Paul's part, as in the case of slavery, since the submission of women runs counter to our culture rather than with it, as in the first century? Are we not free to develop egalitarian marriages based on mutually apart from any hierarchy of submission and authority? In other words, is the submission of wives valid in our day? Submission is valid for all times and cultures because it is fitting in the Lord. In God's original creation, the man and woman together were to reflect God's image, which in part involves voluntary submission of the Son to the Father in order to carry out the divine plan of salvation. Remember, that up until the time when a woman opened the door allowing sin to enter creation, thus causing a need for a plan for the advent of salvation, things were very different. Now, there's more to this conversation, but I'm going to hold that until next week, next time, unless God leads me to have a different topic to share with you. But I think that we talked enough about the understanding that one should walk away with when it comes to submission. The relationship in a marriage, as God has designed it to be, as God is the head, then the man following God's lead, then the woman under the man in support of the man and the woman under Christian understanding, came together in marriage and are now one. So both of you need to be on the same page all the time. Otherwise, it's not one, it's two. And when it comes down to the conversation in the final day, God is not going to be standing there talking about, well, you were right and you were right. He's going to say, I put so-and-so at the lead, and whatever you had to say, you should have came to me, God, and had a conversation with me to help you understand what he would have you to do. You are still one, and he's going to talk to you as if you were one, not as if you were individual. This stuff that we've come up with in our society, where on the one hand, if you really look at what's come up in our society, that one personage has designed this world, this society, to be as they would have it to be, not as God would have it to be. There's no reason for racial plight. I'm talking about here in America. I don't know about any place else. There's no reason for it because we're all God's children. But one man, one group has decided that there's a difference between the two. They use that leverage, that same thinking when they talk about men and women. It's okay when the one group is talking about, well, the hierarchy is man and woman, but it's not really man and woman. It's man, that particular group, then that group's women, then the other man's woman, then the other man. So let me make it crystal clear to you. White men, white women, black women, black men. That's not how God designed it. How we've wound ourselves into this as being acceptable, that's on us. But the reality is, there are a heck of a lot more black men in this world than there are white men. There's a reason for it. And God will explain it to you. Okay? So when the enemy steps up and starts pointing to, well, this and that and this and that, go to your Bible. See what God has to say about that. And then let God do what God does. Because right now, he's still in charge. So with that, God bless you. And I'll see you again next week, God willing, and the creek don't rise.
Not many would leave their entire lives behind for a man they barely knew. But that's exactly what 12 extraordinary individuals did. In the book, Meet the 12 Men Who Follow Jesus, Dr. Larry Montgomery Sr. takes you on a profound journey. Discover the lives of the disciples, who each played a crucial role in spreading the message of Christ. This isn't just a history lesson, it's a deep dive into faith and sacrifice. These men, from different walks of life, proved that race and background don't matter to God. What counts is belief, and everything else falls into place. Can you name the disciple whose life embodied Jesus' last words? This book will answer that and so much more. Whether you're looking to strengthen your faith or seeking an inspirational read, this book is your go-to resource. Available now on Amazon. Order your copy today and get inspired by the 12 men who walked with Jesus.
Thanks be to God. You have been listening to another episode of the Walking by Faith podcast hosted by Minister Larry Montgomery, Sr. and friends. Join us again next time as we continue to labor in this vineyard with an eye towards bringing the words of God to those who are interested. Remember, the sole purpose of this podcast is to present candid discussions about various words that are found in the Bible with an eye towards defining in the context of these troubled times, along with clarity, insight, commentary, and hopefully some revelation to interested listeners. This podcast is a presentation of the Montgomery Media Group.tv and can be found on most podcast platforms. Video presentations are available on YouTube, the African American Shopping Network channel. This show is sponsored by www.theauthor's Corner online. Please like us and follow us on Facebook. May God continue to bless you and yours until next time. God bless.